Hello and welcome to another episode of the Juan on Juan podcast. I'm your host Juan. I just got done talking to Dr. Joseph Lumpkin. Joseph is the CEO and founder of Fifth Estate Publishing, and he has written over 25 books on the subjects of theology, religion, church history, the lost books of the Bible. Joseph also has a background in research and development within the U.S. Department of Defense. He's worked on projects including hypersonic missile technology and supercomputer clustering. In addition to his background, he has a doctorate in ministry and has acted as a chaplain to several family outreach programs. Awesome individual. And on this episode, we talk about one of my favorite subjects. This is demonology, angelology, these non-canonical, heretical scriptures, literature, whatever you want to call it, that really just break the world down, and it just fascinates me. All the history that you can pull from that, and it just really makes you think. All of this ties in with my research in the realm of Gnosticism. Ancient civilizations, ancient aliens, whatever you want to call it, the Anunnaki, what I would consider the juice. This was definitely an impromptu show. I don't want to say I was ill-prepared, but I was ill-prepared. And when I talk to somebody such as Dr. Joseph Lumpkin, who's an expert, what I would consider an expert in the realm of all of this, I like to be prepared. I like to ask the right questions. And unfortunately, we were going to push this show back further till next week, but life happens and things go on. So we decided to last minute just jump right in and sort of wing it. I had some questions done, but I feel my knowledge is enough to entice a good conversation and get an episode out of it. But folks, this is the beginning. This is the tip of the iceberg. What we talk about. It goes so much deeper than what we discuss in this episode. This is like a crash course in Enochian literature, the lost books of the Bible, whatever you want to call it. So just keep that in mind, and hopefully in the future we will have Dr. Joseph on again to be able to discuss this further, the origins of evil and all this good stuff that I love. And today we talk about all of that and some. So without further ado, this is Lost Books of the Bible, Enoch, Fallen Angels, the Nephilim, and the Watchers with Dr. Joseph Lumpkin. Okay, we are live, Joseph. Thank you for coming on the show and welcome.
Thank you very much, Juan. Good to be here.
So this is a bit of an impromptu show. When I first, look into a topic, my podcast is having topics which I'm interested in, things that I like to talk about, obviously because it's my podcast. So I like to understand the material at hand, and I like to be able to comprehend it for myself. Obviously, I'm going to learn from you today. I'm going to be asking you questions, and we're going to go back and forth, but I always like to have a level of comprehension, obviously. I'm not going to go in blindly. And so I always ask this question to people who come on the podcast, sort of sets the tone. It'll be the first question I'll be asking you. Who is Dr. Joseph Lumpkin?
Oh, I have no idea. I reinvent myself every decade or two. Otherwise, I get bored with me. This particular journey began when I was working for the Department of Defense as an analyst, and I was also going through a doctoral program in theology, and I came across a particular quote in Jude stating that he would come back with 10,000s of his saints. Now, I need to say to everyone out there, if you are going through theology school, if you are in seminary, you are usually indoctrinated more than you are educated. So as a good Baptist boy, I ran across this quote that said he'll come back with 10,000s of his saints. Please see 1EN, which I had never heard of. And I looked it up. and it was first Enoch. And I thought, well, if it's quoted in the Bible, I should probably look into this thing. And when I read it, I came back home and I told my wife, I said, this is one horrible translation. I believe I can do better. And that's what began this journey, which is now about 12 years in, and we've published countless books, starting with 1, 2, and 3, Enoch and Jasher and Jubilees, and we've gone on from there to Lost Books of the Bible. So, Juan, that's who I am today.
Before we dive any deeper, Joseph, where can people find your work? I know you run a publishing company, correct me if I'm wrong, and where can people find your work?
Oh, it's best just to find it on Amazon. It would be good, but we have a couple of websites. If you want to look specifically, there's a website called apocryphalbooks.org, and that would probably be the best website. There's also one called fifthestatepub.com, and they tie together, but you'll see a slightly different look on each one of them.
Cool. Yeah, and again, this is a lot of heretical and non-canonical ancient literature. So obviously, you were going and doing your doctorate's program, and you saw that in the Bible it quoted a non-canonical text. So would you say that got you started in the study of this non-canonical ancient literature, these heretical texts? Because before the show, we were chatting, and I told you that, that's one of my problems with religion, because obviously there's monetary gain behind it, and why do you think that is, Joseph? From a person obviously who studied this, why do you think there is, obviously, who decided what was canonical and non-canonical?
Well, to the victors go the spoils, right? So we have two things going on at the same time. We have a community of Jews that are, and this is like let's call it pre-Pauline, okay? So they have certain books that they're passing around, and that community gets fairly familiar with certain books, and then Paul comes in and he writes, and they get familiar with those books, and so what's familiar with the community becomes canon. But there's another thing going on, and that is that the church is being converted from a grassroots organization of, let's call it a horizontal organization, to a vertical organization where the power is flowing up to the priests and the popes and all of that. So in that period of time, when you are in the majority, if you are leading the organization which is becoming Christianity, you get to choose what you believe. And the choice is, a lot of it is based on culling everything that is opposed to your belief. So canon is established by basically two mechanisms. Number one is what's familiar within your organization, and the other is what is opposed to the beliefs of your organization. And so those you cull, and that, I believe, is a very thumbnail sketch of how we got to where we are today. The problem is that Christianity is not Christianity worldwide. And I know that's going to disturb a lot of your westernized listeners, but we have 66 books in our canon as Protestants. There's another 14 if you're believing in the Apocrypha and you're part of the Orthodox or Catholic churches. But one of the oldest Christianities in the world is the Ethiopic church. There's a saying that everything flows down the Nile, and that's exactly what happened to Ethiopia. It received things coming from Egypt pretty much directly in that area. We ended up with 81 books in their canon. Now, who are we as younger Christians, as younger church denominations, to say that one of the oldest is incorrect? Do you really believe that God is saying less and less through time? I believe probably not. He's probably saying more and more. So when I got to a point in Enoch that I understood that it was actually canon in one of the oldest churches in the world, it really stopped me in my tracks, and I began looking at canon from a different point of view.
Yeah, this is what fascinates me, and again, what we talked about before we came on the show, uh, the heresy, the heretical texts. A lot of them, obviously you have the Gnostic texts, which some flip everything on its head, and what you mentioned earlier about the structure, this restructuring of the church. Obviously, it is a brokered experience, and then you had the, like you said, they have to go in and make everything before them that doesn't fit the narrative invalid. Null everything out. It's just like what happened with the Gnostics. You know, they believed that divinity was within us, but now in order to find divinity, you have to go through the church. You have to go through them, and it's a brokered experience.
Yes, that's very good. Brokered experience. I love that. And it does put everything in context, doesn't it? Because if God is in you and around you, as the book of Thomas says,
Mm-hmm.
what good are priests and popes and bishops?
Exactly.
So if you are wanting to control the gates of heaven and have entry fees paid, you don't want to be a Gnostic. You want to quash that. But the Gnostics, they answered a question that people were asking at the time and still are. Why does bad things happen? Why do bad things happen to good people? Why do evil people prosper? Why is there chaos and disease in the world? And they answered that question very, very well. It exists because the maker of this world was himself evil and broken. And so here we are with an infrastructure of the world evil and broken. And so the Gnostics, knowing that religion tries to answer the deeper questions, I honestly think that some of the Gnostic doctrine answers some questions much better and more straightforward than some of the it's God's will that a baby dies. You have trouble buying that.
I agree. They answered a lot of things, and one of the things that blows my mind is that they were in a way able to answer the question of how we came to be, because one of the I'm not sure the exact text. I think it's the Apocrypha of John or something like that, where the disciples ask him, how does it end? And Jesus says, have you already forsaken the beginning? The ending is where the beginning is. So in order to understand the ending, you have to understand the beginning. And they explain that, the thinking came first, then the thought, then you have the child, a thought thinking of itself, something like that. The Trinity. And then you have the one, obviously. And I feel that that's what quantum physics now is trying to correlate, the consciousness with the physical world, and how our thoughts have power in the physical world. And I feel like they sort of got that concept from the very beginning by saying that, that the first thing was the thought, that's how we came into existence.
Yes. There's a saying that when science ascends to the pinnacle of the mountain, they'll find religion there waiting for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the Apocryphon of John also is a very odd book because it breaks down the actual manufacturing of man into different pieces, which looks a whole lot like who programmed what strand of DNA. This particular one manufactured the skin, this other one the sinew, this one the bones, that one the left hand and the right hand, so on and so forth. And it breaks mankind down into kind of a shopping cart of who made what piece.
It's very, very different. I agree. Um, Today we're gonna break down obviously what I told you. And we'll get into that because this is something that I love. Theology fascinates me. Today we're gonna talk about Enoch, fallen angels, the Nephilim, and the Watchers. And then I know you've written. I think you wrote a book. It was called The Origins of Evil. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, that's correct.
Which also interests me. You know, the demonology and how in the book of Enoch, we essentially have the origins of demons. You know how you said, I was listening to your other material about how the body can be destroyed, but the energy and that spirit cannot, and that's how we have demons nowadays. Um, so to begin, who was Enoch? And then you have Enochian literature, and obviously Enoch, one of the most fascinating characters, um, in Christianity because he was taken up with God. Was he the only person that was taken up with God without dying? Correct me if I'm
No,
wrong.
no, no. You had Ezekiel taken up in a chariot, but this is the only time that the Bible says that a man walked with God and was not. In other words,
Mm,
he just disappeared. He was translated, much apparently like Jesus was translated on the Mount of Transfiguration. Uh, he he ascended, and that particular problem stuck in the craw of Jews. It's the reason that we have second and third Enoch. They could not get their head around why anything that was corporeal could walk with God, because in their theology at the time, you had this chasm between what is corporeal, fleshly, earthly, and what is heavenly, and they could not intermingle. The glory of God was such that his divinity could not mingle with man directly, and so we have. Well, let me just put it this way: a lot of our literature is based on people trying to answer questions that really bothered them theologically. Whether they should have bothered them or not, it's a different question. But for example, the Enochian literature has Enoch ascending into a state uh, of an angel, right? He is Metatron at the end of the storyline, and that was because the Jews could not let go of the fact that this man was walking around in heaven, and it just did not fit with their theology. So much so that in one of the Enochian books, Third Enoch, I believe, the angels are purportedly telling God, "What is the smell of human semen I smell in heaven?" Now it gets pretty when you read the story and you actually put flesh and blood on it. It gets really interesting and a little gross, because the angels are so grossed out by the fact that they can smell humans and they can smell the seed of humans uh, in heaven, that God changes him into Metatron and makes them worship him as the lesser Yahweh.
really?
So that's people don't usually read Third Enoch.
Yeah. Well, before you go on, Joseph, the first book, they say that he didn't write the second and the third.
That's
Uh,
correct. That's correct.
that there's a discrepancy there because it gets it's like you said, it gets crazier.
It does.
The first one is already crazy, then you
Yeah.
have the second one that gets crazier, and then the third one is like, okay. And you know, even in the Bible, it's a lot more interesting than people give it credit to be. And again, this is why it interests me. And but yeah, go on. That's it's very interesting. I've only read the first one, so.
Well, most people have, because that's actually the one that's canonical, and it's closer to our scripture, and it informs our angelology and demonology, like
Hmm.
you said. But the second and third one, they're like sequels, and sometimes rather bad sequels, but sequels nonetheless, because they're carrying the story forward and trying to uh, answer questions that are raised within their theology. Now, you ask who Enoch is, and I guess the short answer is Adam beget Seth, beget Enosh, beget Kenan, beget Methuselah, beget Jared. And in the days of Jared, the Watchers arrived. And then uh, Jared beget Enoch. And in the days of Enoch, we learned to read and write, which really ticked God off. He thought that was the worst sin, was the fact that we could read and write, and therefore we could carry our sins forward. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, Joseph, here's the thing. The more I look into the Gnostics and these ancient texts, some of these Gnostics had the idea that the Old Testament was of demonic origins, and
Right. Yeah.
the more I look into it, what you just said now about he was angry that they were writing, he was angry that they were learning. In the Garden of Eden, when the snake comes out and says, "Listen, eat from," again, I might be getting this wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I have so many things in my head. Eat from the tree of knowledge. Don't eat and Yahweh, the other guy, I believe it's an eagle or something like that, was telling him to eat from the tree of life. The Gnostics believe that Yahweh, obviously Yaldabaoth, and this demon, Satan, whatever you want to call it, the creator of all the universe, he wanted us to live and eat from the tree of life because they wanted us to live the life that they wanted, that him and the archons created. And then if you would have ate from the tree of knowledge, you would know what created you and who created you, and you would find that divinity within you through gnosis. And
Interesting, isn't it?
it's fascinating. It's
Yeah,
fascinating,
yeah.
and like you said, now he was mad because we were learning to read and write. I wonder
Yeah.
why.
Well, it does bounce back and forth between what is mainline Christianity, especially in the Ethiopic Christian Church, which is more mystical. All the Eastern churches are more mystical than the Western. It bounces back and forth between that and Gnosticism. As you said, Yahweh and Yaldabaoth are according to the Gnostics, the same
Hmm.
serpent beast and the same creator. Um, Boy, where was I going with this? The
They're
non
learning to read and write, and that angered Yahweh or
So they wanted us to live forever, but they wanted us to live forever in ignorance. They wanted
yeah.
us to eat from the tree of life, and but not the tree of knowledge. Live forever, but live in ignorance under our thumb.
Hmm. Yeah, that's again, that fascinates me. And then so Enoch, and correct me if I'm wrong, was Noah's great grandfather.
Um, Great great grandfather. Yeah, well, great. Like it goes Noah, um, um, Lamech, and then I'm sorry, it goes Enoch, Lamech, Noah, I believe.
Yeah, because that and then Noah, obviously Atrahasis, and then you have all these other uh texts that you got the pre-diluvian and then the post-diluvian.
Right.
We'll
Yeah.
get into that. But obviously he was a grandfather. He was family to him.
Hmm.
Um, so Enoch, obviously this person that went up to heaven, and the angels even brought him down and showed him everything that was going on in the world, and then uh, a lot of dark stuff. The world was full of evil. It talks about there was pedophiles and that there was demons and all this stuff on Earth. What
So,
are Go ahead.
no, well, I was going to say, when they descended on Mount Hermon, there were 200 of them. There were 20 groups of 10.
These are
One
the
of them,
fallen angels,
yes,
Joseph.
yes, I'm sorry, the fallen angels, the Watchers, yeah. Which I guess we should kind of tie this together real quick, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff going on that people kind of they kind of combine them in ways that are not true. So Mount Hermon, the days of Jared, they come down, and there's 200 of them, and they're in these cases of 10, 20 leaders, 10 companies each. One of them is Azazel, and or Azazel, or however you want to pronounce it. I've heard it several ways. And to him, for some reason, they are God is very angry with him. He ascribes all sin to him. Now, it's interesting to me that name appears again in Leviticus in a very, very odd text that says you're going to choose 2 goats. One, the scapegoat, one will be for God, and that's the sacrifice. The other goat will be for Azazel, or Azazel. So even back in the days of Leviticus, far beyond where Enoch started, Jared started, this demon had made such an impact on people that they were actually still sacrificing to it. And so in the middle of the Bible, in the Old Testament, you have this command that you will take a goat and you'll sacrifice it to God. Then you'll take the other goat and you'll lay hands on it, impart all the sins of the people, send it out, make sure it doesn't come back, send it over a cliff if you can, and that goat is Azazel's.
Really? And this is one of the fallen angels, one of the
Yes,
leaders.
this is one of the Watchers. This is one of the fallen angels, and he is actually, uh, according to some sources, the father of Gilgamesh.
Really? This is and again, so you would say the fallen angels and the watchers are the same?
Yes, the fallen angels and Watchers, in the way that I understand it, are the same, which are not the same as the Nephilim, the Elio, or the giants. So the Watchers came down. There are 3 falls in the storyline. There's the fall of mankind. There's the fall of the angels first, the heavenly host of angels, a third of the angels, and of course Lucifer. There's the fall of mankind, and there's the fall of the Watchers. So this is the 3rd fall we're talking about. So the Watchers came down. They left their heavenly homes. They forsook their first estate, it says, and they took women as they wished. And they gave birth, according to the books of Jasher, Jubilee, and Enoch. If you put all these things together, they gave birth to 3 different subspecies: the giants, the Nephilim, and the Elio. Now, the only thing that we can say about the Elio is it looks like that word means godling. Godling. Think about that. That's Achilles, Hercules, all of these people that we look at in Greek and Roman literature. I think they were the Elio. Could be wrong. Everything in my head could be wrong. It's an opinion, right?
Half god, half human, demigod type thing.
Precisely, precisely. And this is actually outlined if you read Jasher's Jubilee and the first book of Enoch together. You'll go, oh my God, this stuff, it dovetails. Well, it happens that the book of Jubilees and the book of Enoch are both canon in the Ethiopic Christian Church, those guys knew things that we threw away.
Or that we chose to ignore.
Yes. Now, some
Because
people will say that the book wasn't available at the time, and you could make that argument that it was lost to the Western Church. When it was first discovered in 1773 by James Bruce, who went to Ethiopia to kind of uncover it, everybody said, "Oh, this is a knockoff. I mean, look at this. It quotes." It quotes Jude. It references Peter. It references the books of Jesus. It's obvious that this is a fake news, fake news. Well, 1946, when the two Bedouin gentlemen were chasing their goat and they picked up a rock and threw it into the caves of Qumran near Nagamati, and it broke the vase, and they went up there. They found, when that began to get excavated, literally dozens of pieces of Enoch, which dated back to about between 150 and 300 BC, long before Jude and Peter were even conceived, and
confirming its legitimacy.
yes, and it turned everything on its head. Everything. We are still finding it. I was called to do an interview in LA a few months ago because I'm one of the few people around that they could get in touch with that understood infrared thermography and spectral analysis and of course the text. And what we're finding is some of these codices that are written on animal skins have been used several times. And if you had a codex of, say, Thomas, and I had two of Enoch, I would scrape off mine Enoch and then copy your Thomas, and I'd have both. Well, if you look at it through infrared thermography, you will find a frequency where the first ink is slightly different from the second ink, and it will reflect differently. And you can tune out the top layer and see the bottom layer, and we're still finding stuff underneath.
Wow.
Underneath things, we're finding things.
That's incredible. So we have the fallen angels. They came down, and they were taking, and this is in Genesis, they were inserting themselves into the daughters of men. Is that what they call them?
Yes.
So they were inserting themselves with daughters of men, and obviously having this offspring, the Nephilim, the Elohim, and the giants. So then this is where it gets weird, and this is what I love. The genetic experiments, the chimeras, hybridization. Can you touch a little bit about that, when they started to experiment and started inserting themselves in animals, in different beasts? And this is why this is where I think we get Bigfoot and all these different crypto zoological creatures, which I feel that they're descendants of these Nephilim. And that's why when people are chasing a Bigfoot, it'll disappear because it might be interdimensional. It might have some sort of power that was handed down to them. You know what I mean? So can you talk a little bit about that, about the genetic experiments that they started to, conduct, and talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll try. So again, I'm kind of going to get off of Enoch here a little bit, but it all kind of comes back. So in the book of Jasher, and by the way, the Mormon Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, holds the book of Jasher in high regard and says that it is absolutely worth reading. So in Jasher 4:18, it talks about gene splicing. It talks about so these angels have come down, the watchers have come down. They're teaching mankind how to mix animals. And so we not only have human genetic processes going on with the Elio and the giants and the Nephilim, but you also have gene splicing going on where they are combining animals. Now, you might want to say that this is a way of them explaining away the Greco-Roman harpies and centaurs and minotaurs and things like that. Or you could look at it the other way around and say the centaurs and minotaurs and harpies and all of the things that are reported in the Greco-Roman pantheon are actually the real thing that's being described in Jasher and Enoch in those books, because religion cross-pollinates. It borrows things from other religions, as we've seen in our own Christianity with the Christmas tree and the Easter egg and the whole thing. Nothing springs to life by itself. It's always informed by the generations before. Now we can go back and say, look, we've even discovered the fact that the first worshiping of Yahweh looks like it comes from a Canaanite mining town, and that it turns out to be that he is a god of miners that caught on and was brought forth. That doesn't mean that God doesn't exist. It just means that our description of him is borrowed from different cultures, and it comes forward like that. So when the gene splicing occurs, the scriptures say, and I'll use the word scriptures loosely, okay, canon or non-canon, that this is the thing that pushed God over the edge, that they defiled the earth with all of these odd creatures. So I want you to stop and think about something just a moment. Why was El so ticked off because they were combining these creatures? Why was he so angry at the Watchers? There's a thing called the axial age. Somewhere around 800 BC it occurred. Until that point, we were just animalistic. When we worshiped God, we would kill things or people or whatever, and everything was external. We were living in a particular way, and then all of a sudden, within just 1,000 years, which is a blink of an eye, we had Zoroaster and Buddha and Confucius and Jesus and all of these great men that all of a sudden the world woke up to an internal landscape, and we became spiritual creatures. I believe that this whole thing has been a genetic test, a laboratory run by El and the group. And when the Watchers came down, they messed up the line. They messed up the purity of the experiment. They put their input into an experiment that was supposed to be run in a pure linear timeline. We are still seeing the advancements from that, whether it be Bigfoot, zoocryptology, like you said, the unknown animals that are out there, or the fact that we as a society woke the hell up in a heartbeat. We went from living in caves to building pyramids in a blink of an eye. And then we went from external bloodthirsty worshipers of some nebulous god to internal spiritual beings seeking escape from the confines of our own mind. It's an amazing thing.
We see that throughout history, Joseph. You're talking about how these texts borrow from other texts. That is true. You have the Epic of Gilgamesh. You have Atrahasis. It's the same thing as the Noah. That story. You have all these different stories of creation, and essentially they all say the same thing. Um, and then what you're talking about, and the reason I say we see this throughout history. Again, going back to that Gnostic belief that the God of the Old Testament, Yahweh, this evil, cruel, jealous God, sacrifice your kids. The firstborn sons are gonna get killed. Child sacrifice, this darkness. The Old Testament, that dark. And then what I mentioned to you before, you see these figures all throughout history, throughout these different uh, all these different sides of the world. You have Mesoamerica, you have ancient Mesopotamia, uh, uh, Egypt. You have these same figures all throughout those different civilizations. Um, and again, Mesoamerica, the Aztecs, the Mayans, all this human sacrifice to what to honor their gods, whatever. The Aztecs, they killed people by the thousands.
Yeah,
Uh,
they sacrifice themselves practically out of existence.
yeah, exactly. And again, the same cycle uh, that we see, and again, if what they call the Anunnaki, I believe Anunnaki means those who came from above or from the heavens, something like that. If they were these fallen angels, these lieutenants, if they
Well,
were or were not. I mean, what are
right.
your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you're right. I, I believe we can prove this even within the scriptures because honestly, we read the Bible, but we don't really read the Bible. It's a nice story and we kind of skip through it. But if you were to take a look at Deuteronomy 32, it says, "Remember the days of old, consider the years of many generations. Ask your fathers, and they will show you, your elders when they tell you. When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the people according to the numbers of the sons of God. And the Lord, the Yahweh's portion, is his people, and Jacob is his allotted inheritance." Well, what that means is God, meaning El, the head guy, took the world, the known world at the time, and he divided it just exactly like the Catholic Church did many years ago to Japan, if you recall, and went, well, this is a new world. We'll give Japan to the highest bidder. It is, Portuguese. Okay, we'll give it to the Portuguese. That's what happened, according to this scripture, to the world. These sons of God looked to their leader, and their leader said, you can have that people, you can have that people, you can have that
Hmm.
people. We'll set the borders, and the lieutenants, as you call them, they will rule their people as gods.
That's why they had the similar aspects to them, and
Yeah.
they're the same or not. I do believe that. So, um, this person, this entity that you're calling, he gets angry with the Watchers, because they were set up to supervise. They were the supervisors, and they went ahead and they fell to temptation, and they said, we want that. We want to experience that.
Yes.
The daughters of men are beautiful. We want to do whatever with them. What happens after that, Joseph? When he gets angry with them?
Well, when he gets angry with them, that apparently is where the flood comes in. Um, Problem is, how in the world do you kill a spiritual being? You can't do it. Uh, there is one apocryphal text that says that there was actually a giant that held on to the hull of the ark and survived that way.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. The Bible says that you know there were giants in the days and afterwards. And I don't know why people skip over that and afterwards, but they do. They think, well, there's giants in the days of Noah, but the Bible actually says and afterwards.
Yeah, well, you got David and Goliath, no?
Yes, you've got David and Goliath. So what do you have? You have tales throughout the world here and there of these red-headed, cannibalistic, polydactyl beings. So one of the signs of giantism goes back to I suppose to the story of Goliath and all of his six, I think it was, brothers and his mother. The giants of Gath, they were all polydactyl. They all had more than 5 fingers on each hand, 5 toes on each foot. They had 6 or more, and was apparently one of the signs. There's a really odd, I forget exactly who wrote this particular thesis, but he postulates that the American Indians, how they raised their hands as they walked toward or rode toward another, was a sign that says, "I am not polydactyl. I am not a giant. I come in peace. I'm not going to eat you or kill you." I thought that was kind of interesting that it drifts all the way over to the American Indians.
That is very interesting. And so we have these Nephilim and these giants. We spoke about the Dead Sea Scrolls. How does the Book of Giants play into this? Because I know it mentions a name of this god king from ancient Mesopotamia. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so we have to decide really if we're cross-pollinating or we're actually just repeating the same thing, or on the same the same page and verse, so to speak. So the book of Enoch was written somewhere around 200 to 300, and some people think as late as 150 A.D. And it turns out that this book of Giants was written at about the same time, about 150 A.D. So they actually are being written about the same time. Now, I am one of those that think that the book of Giants actually belonged in the book of Enoch. And it fits really, really very well within the first book called the Book of the Watchers. So if you take, because Enoch is made up of several sections, if you take the oldest section, which is the Book of the Watchers, one of my books literally places the Book of Giant right back into where it belongs within the Book of Watchers, within the Book of Enoch. So you have nests of literature within nests of literature. And within that, you're reading along, and it's kind of, we don't have the whole text. It's damaged, so we're reading along as best we can. And all of a sudden, this name pops up. Now, in the Book of Giants, you have 2 giants that are basically having a conversation about the fact that they feel like the end is coming and God's about to get them. So they call on Enoch to be a liaison between them and God, and they're trying to broker a peace, and basically God says, "No, I'm going to kill you." But in the middle of this, we have this statement. It says that Gilgamesh, one of the giants, proclaims that despite his great strength and courage and his ability to kill any human on the planet, he could not withstand the heavenly host that's about to come. We also find out that Gilgamesh is the son of Azazel. And so the Book of Giants really kind of puts this into focus that this has happened. God is exceedingly ticked. He's about to send Raphael. Raphael is involved in this. And he's sending messages to and from Enoch. And he's telling these guys, there'll be no peace. You're going to die, and all your children are going to die. Prepare for it. Now, it's interesting that as it goes along, because you really can't kill a heavenly being, he takes Azazel and puts him under stone in a cave, and he keeps him there. But Gilgamesh is mentioned as one of the offspring, which I believe Gilgamesh is not necessarily a giant. He could be, but he's also a Elio. He's a godling. He's a demigod, and it all ties together. It's very interesting, and it pulls in the Mesopotamian legends and gives them a direct correlation to the fallen angels.
Well, I mean, some of the books in the Bible did plagiarize some of the stories from them.
Yeah.
Um, so when God tries to, or this figure tries to destroy these things, that's when you say that the body was destroyed, but the spirits, because I think it's, who is it? Is it, I forgot what scientist or physicist says that, energy can't be destroyed. It can only be, transformed. I don't know if it's Albert Einstein or I'll look it up later.
It's one of the laws of thermodynamics.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. So and this gets kind of interesting. We look back into the Old Testament and we look at where these guys came from, and they're in this particular area of the Middle East, and it happens to be the same area in the Middle East that the prophet Samuel sent Saul into to kill everything living. And Saul didn't do it. Saul brought back these animals and the king as a sacrifice to God. And Samuel gets incredibly angry. I mean, just over the top angry. And basically he takes Saul's power, authority away from him. And you kind of wonder what's going on there. Well, that's the place that the fallen angels were. And the theory is that they could inhabit about anything. So you go through and you kill everything that's living, everything that's breathing, everything that walks, everything that moves, and you leave no body for them to inhabit.
Mm-hmm.
So, I do not know what the books say that when they come out of the body, they are incredibly angry, they are enraged, and they go to and from tormenting men. And if that's not a demon, I don't know what is. So it's a perfect example.
But the jinn, they call it the jinn.
At that point in the Middle East, they called it a jinn. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. That's and then we get, speaking of David and Goliath, you could follow that, to Solomon, King Solomon, and the things that they said about him with the occult.
Yeah.
With Solomonic magic and
Solomon, right.
and how he used the demons to build the Temple of Jerusalem.
It's some very interesting things, because these things, the bodies could be killed, but the spirits cannot.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. And yeah, and what you mentioned earlier about when we read the Bible, we don't read the Bible. And my problem with that is that, when you go to church, if if they told me, listen, Pastor Joseph today is gonna be having a sermon about the book of Enoch and the giants and the watchers, you'd bet your ass I'd be there that day, because this is super interesting, but they don't.
No.
So we read bits and pieces of it. And then another problem that I have with the Bible is that, or with church, with the Bible, the different translations, Joseph. And what are your what's your input on that? That, obviously you have the original Greek text.
No, let me stop you there. That's not true.
Really?
We have 5,000 pieces of codices, more than that actually. Not a single one of them agree. So let's kind of reframe this. When someone says, well, it's in the original Greek, I want to go, well, what codex are you using?
Mm.
There's Vaticanus. There's the Texas Receptus. There's dozens of others. Nestles that the NIV uses.
Well, that's my exact point, Joseph. That there's so many different translations
Yeah.
and all these different versions. How do you know which is the real one?
Well, you don't. What you can do is you group these things like they are family trees, and it's a little bit too simplistic to say the farther back you go, the more the less error you have. That's true if you group it in a grand way. If you look at the whole thing, then the farther back you go, the less time for error and the less opportunity for error you have, because the less times it's copied. But we let me give you an example. And this is recently, but the fact that it's recent means that it kind of drives the point home. Sitting in Branson, Missouri, we'll take that one because that's just right down the road here, is something called the Adulterer's Bible. It's called the Adulterer's Bible because they left out a word. It says, "Thou shalt commit adultery." So what happened was that the publishing company in 1631, Robert Baker, I think his name was a printer and a publisher, and he was asked by the king to put these Bibles out, and he left out a word. And there's only about 4 of them left, but it kind of goes to the point of can we trust the Bibles? Well, there's dozens of these Bibles that have dozens of these errors. And then you have different codices and the witnesses, they call them. The general term for a document is a witness. So you have these witnesses that are older and older. So let's just look at it this way. Take the King James, which is a Textus Receptus. We know it has errors in it because it's not the oldest. We know that scribes tend to add to or change instead of take away. So if a text has less than another text, we consider it to be probably older and probably more reliable. So you open up the Bible to the Lord's Prayer, and you look at the last verse, which is called the doxology. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. It is a phenomenal, moving verse that does not exist in the old witnesses.
Wow.
And that is why when you open up the, the NIV, it won't be there.
And again, that's my problem with all this, Joseph. I believe in that higher power. I believe that there is something that created everything, but at this point, I don't know what it is. And there is a mystical comprehension to all of this as well as a literal comprehension. And you have people who live and die by the Bible.
Yeah.
But then it's like you've mentioned before, our understanding of the Bible is not the same understanding that they have all the way on the other side of the world, even though it's the same religion. And then on top of that, you have Catholics, and then a bunch of different types of Catholics under that. You have Christians, you have Pentecostals, you have Baptists, you have all these different types of Christians. And, we can't all be right at the end of the day.
Denominations usually come from someone's fixation on a particular series of verses, and so they make those very important to their understanding, and they spin off a denomination. Just down the road here is Cleveland, Tennessee. It's the home of at least 2 denominations, the Church of God of Prophecy and the Church of God of Cleveland, Tennessee. And they were spun off by brothers who had a disagreement. Much the same way as the little towns of of Palmerdale and Rimlap were spun off by two brothers right down the road here from where I live, because Palmer, one of the brothers, got ticked off, and the story goes when he looked in his rearview mirror, Palmer spelled backwards was Rimlap, so he named his town Rimlap. Um, People, we just do not have the capacity for harmony. I don't know why, but we so become so fixated. When the problem is this, and Christ said this, just love your brother, just be kind, seek God, love your brother. The rest is commentary.
Mm-hmm.
So we can go back and we push Christianity back to a point that it becomes Jewish. We take Judaism and we push it back, and it becomes fed by Canaanite and Philistine, we find that the Canaanite god El is a war god. His symbol is a bull. We find out that Yahweh is part of his pantheon, because Baal and a great group of others was part of the pantheon of gods under the great god El, and they were his sons. And you have fights within these belief systems. There were worshippers of Baal, and there were worshippers of Yahweh, and they hated each other, much like Islam and Christianity does today, or the Sunnis and the Shia, or the Protestants and the Catholics years ago, because of these differences. And so in the middle of the Bible, all of a sudden you have curses against Baal, and stories about Baal and Yahweh's prophets battling each other, and Yahweh's prophets coming out on top, because Yahweh's prophets were the ones writing the book. But they were both pantheons, members of the pantheon, and offspring of the god El, according to Canaanite folklore.
Yeah, and you got this again in Greek mythology as well. The conflicts between all of the different gods and stuff like that. So, and again, correct me if I'm wrong. From what I'm understanding, because I've heard this theory before. I'm going to be doing an episode with another individual who looks into esoterica and iconography and stuff like that of the Bible, and he goes as far, well, he interprets what he's read as to go as far. And obviously, that there's different beliefs as to what God is. You have it'll go as far as God was a mushroom. Like these different beliefs. And from what you're telling me, because we haven't touched on this, and this is I wanted to wrap up with this. Where does Satan come in to all of this? Because obviously we see Satan as this ruler of the underworld, or whatever you want to call it, hell, this prime figure. Where does he tie into all this? Because what you're telling me is that they were brothers, Yahweh and El. Is that what you were?
Yahweh was the offspring of El, according to Canaanite history, folklore, theology, whatever you want to call it. So was Baal. So if we roll our belief system back to the time of Job, which is one of the first books written in the scriptures, we find that Satan, Lucifer, was actually just carrying out orders. He was a minion. He was just another angel. He was a foot soldier. Nothing unusual. He was kind of like let's call him a purifier. He was the one that kind of put you through the ordeal and proved your devotion or not. But he was an agent of God, working under God's authority. and he remained that way until we began to get into Zoroastrian influence, where the world was divided between good and evil. It became binary. It was never binary until then, because God was in that early theology. He was the agent of both good and evil. Anything that happened came from God, whether it be good or bad. It was just all from God. But somehow in our tiny little brains, we decided that we couldn't have a God that was both good and evil. Of course, it's our perception of what's good and evil, because we're only a microsecond of the timeline. So Zoroastrianism has a split universe of good versus evil, and we kind of adopted that, and we placed Satan as the agent of evil. And soon after that, he kind of evolved in our way of thinking to almost equal to God. Now, if you think about it, that's kind of blasphemous, really, but that's where we have him today. Is, he can force us to do anything. The devil made me do it. He is he is the agent of all evil, and
we get into the Gnostic dualistic view of things, Joseph.
Yeah.
When you talk about that, this good and then the evil, and then the Gnostics even go as far as to say that we were created by this Satan figure, Yaldabaoth, this evil, from his powers of being divine. When Sophia gave birth to him, obviously that divinity went down into him as well. And then the archons, his posse, they all said, hey, let's make man. You have the anthropos, and then they wanted, the flesh, the slave, whatever they wanted to do. Very interesting stuff, Joseph. Very, very interesting.
So when you consider that the book of Job was written probably around 6th century BCE, it very much predates the Gnostic stuff. And the Gnostics, I think, borrowed heavily from the fact that Zoroastrianism had kind of infiltrated everything. I tend to reject that. I believe that the majority of evil comes directly from us. We are our own worst enemy, and we are, we are part of God. He is part of us. We have that divine spark. We are inspired. That means that we have been breathed into. We have the capacity to create, which means that we also have the capacity to destroy and mutilate. And I think that that's where we are right now, and we should wake up.
Yes. Dare I say, we are in an experiment, a simulation, how you said earlier, almost the simulation-like thing that the Watcher started to mess with. I like that idea. So, Joseph, we'll wrap up with that. Where can you say your website again? I actually have the encyclopedia that I'm going to be buying on Amazon to add to my collection.
Thanks for supporting the cause.
Definitely. I want to thank you for your time. And again, can you tell the people where they can find your work? Because again, you've compiled numerous books on this topic. I love this sort of thing. I could talk about this for hours. Where can they find your work once more?
We have the main website is apocryphalbooks.org. And you will find Audible and best-selling books and all kinds of paperbacks and hardbacks there.
Well, Joseph, I want to thank you again so much. Very, very interesting stuff. I love it. And again,
we'll do it again sometime when our lives can open up enough to do it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you can come back on whenever you want. We can talk about this again. I could talk about this for hours, and it's one of my favorite topics to talk about.
It's been a pleasure, and we've just scratched the surface, as you know. So there's more to talk about whenever you want. And I appreciate your invitation greatly. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That was Dr. Joseph Lumpkin. Make sure to check out his work on Amazon. Check out his website if you're interested in this type of stuff. Remember to follow us on social media at the Juan on Juan Podcast. Shoot me an email if you want to be on the show. If you have anything interesting to talk about, the Juan on Juan Podcast at gmail.com. Also remember to like, subscribe, whatever it is, share the podcast with anyone you may know. Every little bit helps. And until next time.